self-care isn't selfish. A starving chef can't feed anyone. We are trained to think by our culture in terms of win-lose arrangements. We all know what a win-win arrangement is, but we carry around this quiet assumption that in order for one person to win, another person has to lose. We apply this to relationships, we apply it to business, we certainly apply it to politics. When you install the guiding principle of mutual benefit, everything changes. Now, I say install, but actually you don't have to do anything to follow this North Star. Actually, mutual benefit is your nature. When you stop perceiving things in terms of self and other, all that remains is the natural wish to do good, because this is just obvious. Of course, we want to do what is good for the whole, for self and other, with no distinction between the two. Everyone who has ever relaxed to a great enough degree that egoic and self-centered striving has ceased has ended up an embodiment of mutual benefit. So let's meditate together, friends, and see if we can taste this naturally arising beneficial intent, as the Tibetans call it, together. If you're not already in a quiet spot, please go find one, pause the video. And when you're there, close your eyes with me. And if you like to begin with some deep breaths, you go ahead and do your thing. I'll keep talking. The ego is a bunch of mental fabrications. It requires a story to even be. It requires at least a past, but very often a future as well. And all of this is imagined. The ego is your imagined sense of yourself, which is where fear resides. Fear that this identity may one day cease. Ego is where clinging occurs, attachment, wanting things to be a certain way, wanting things to be at all. And so, of course, the ultimate fear is the fear of death. Where one imagines one loses everything. But who is the one who loses things? To whom are things attached when they are gained? When we settle into a single moment, we see that ownership is impossible. In terms of your direct experience, you have never owned anything. Therefore, you can never lose anything. Now, this does not mean that you go and Tipex out your name on the deed to your house. In relative terms, we own things. This is very convenient. In absolute terms, it is greatly beneficial for us to acknowledge that we don't own anything, therefore we can't lose anything, and there was no one here who could own or lose anything. This does not negatively impact your ability to function in the world. You do not lose, by means of spiritual practice, the ability to speak about owning things, to conceptualize owning things. Actually, the opposite is true. By seeing that ownership is conceptual, by seeing that identity is conceptual, you become more effective because you're free. No longer is fear bound up in all of this. No longer do you receive with one hand while simultaneously fearing that you might give away with the other. You abide in a more zoomed out perspective, so to speak. Easy come, easy go. But also, the less you cling to your individual identity, the less complaint you have about things going, because you're pleased to pass things on. You're pleased to share. It's the difference between Ebenezer Scrooge in that old Dickens novel, I think it was Dickens. The selfish old man who scraped every penny. Versus the charitable, altruistic, philanthropic person. Or just the ordinary person who is generous with their time. Those words, philanthropy, altruism, they tend to conjure up images of Bill Gates types wielding hundreds of millions of dollars. But of course this is very unusual. It's kind of grotesque in a way. We must not use examples like Bill Gates to make ourselves feel as though our own small acts of kindness are insignificant. This is very dangerous on a global scale. if 100,000 people look at someone like Bill Gates and say, well, what can I do? And they don't give to charity, they don't support local businesses, they don't move into a career where they can do more good. That's a huge net loss for society. But if these 100,000 people understand the kinds of things I talk about in these videos, if those 100,000 people dissolve the apparent solidity of their sense of self, then they find the opportunity to relax into that naturally arising mutual benefit of which I spoke. Like I said, anyone who has made a sincere go at all of this has found, if they only continue to rest naturally without seeking or describing anything, which is the end of all spiritual practices, then they find that doing good is the only game in town. Why would we do anything else? Imagine you're sat on a park bench. It's a sunny day. The birds are singing. Flowers are blooming. The air smells sweet. And you are perfectly satisfied. You are content. Then a child approaches you and tells you they're hungry. What do? Of course, you care for the child. You probably ask where the child's parents are. But your immediate, natural urge is to care. This urge extends in all directions as a function of your nature. And of course, the child is the powerful image. But once you're content, it can just as easily be an adult. It can be anyone. Even your enemy. You even wish to care for your enemy. Because for you, it feels bad to keep them as an enemy. That requires mental fabrication. It requires a story. In the absence of that story, there is just another being, and perhaps they're maintaining their own stories. But you see with compassion that hurts them too. Kill 'em with kindness is the appropriate phrase here. Of course, you're not killing the person's body. you're killing the mentally constructed image of them as an enemy, so that they are no longer an enemy, just a fellow human being who perhaps is struggling in the game of finding satisfaction and dissolving dissatisfaction. Great compassion for that one who was never told how satisfaction really works, how to be free from dissatisfaction. But one who knows has no enemies. One who knows doesn't think about being kind, doesn't think about caring for others or caring for themselves. That care arises as naturally as the wind. All you must do to realize this naturally arising mutual benefit is relax. Rest naturally without seeking or describing anything, as the Tibetans say. Of course, you may not find that easy, especially when faced with your enemy. And so there is your practice. Come and sit with me and do these meditations and make these recognitions again and again and again. Then it becomes easier for you to recognize these truths when you're out in the world doing what you do. As I made these recognitions myself, I found not only that things became magnificently easy, but that as such I was actually more effective in the world, more effective in work, more effective in conversation, more effective in any goal I set in the relative world. Though what I also found was that goals that were not deeply aligned became impossible to pursue. My teenage dream was to be the best drummer in the world. And that dream was selfish. It was based on proving myself. It was based on impressing people for validation. Very egoic. And as I made these recognitions, as I learned to relax and dissolve the ego, dissolve the mental fabrications that I had used to run my life up to the age of 30, I found that that teenage ambition fell away. That led to a period of feeling lost. But what came on the other side was a life dedicated to mutual benefit. Not benefit for me, not benefit for others, benefit for all as one body. So we want to be like the chef who is themselves well fed before they enter into the kitchen and begin preparing food for others. And then, having worked all afternoon to prepare the meal, also sits with the guests and enjoys the food with them as one of them. May you taste and recognize and acknowledge this wish to do good as your fundamental nature. And may it guide your actions like a North Star. If you liked this guided meditation, give it a like. If you want more of these meditations, hit subscribe. Let me know how this practice went for you in the comments. Drop me any other reflections or questions you might have, and I'll see you in the next one.